Hey everybody, Ryan Molly here, and I am really excited about this week's guest. He's a buddy of mine from 2012, so I've known him for well over a decade. He's an orthopedic colleague, orthopedic buddy. Worked with him with a small orthopedic company that has now become a relatively big orthopedic company, one of the fastest growing orthopedic companies in the world, Medacta. And he's a great guy. He's a unbelievable individual at what he does professionally. But what I've really grown to appreciate about this individual is who he is personally. And he has so much passion for life, for his family, his wife, his children, and his 10 grandchildren. So you're going to want to stick around. We got Matt Delong coming up, and it's going to be a great episode. Talk to you soon.
All nurses to the nurses station.
All us country people are real close family. Lately, some of my kinfolk don't get around too good, you see. When that doctor asked them, son, how'd you get in this condition? They says, hey, soft bones, I'm just carrying on an old family tradition. They wanna know, Doc, why do you think I got some pain in my joints from years of playing hard in this life that's too short? When that doctor asked me, son, how'd you get in this condition? I says, hey, soft bones, I'm just carrying on an old family tradition. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Tell me all about it, Doc.
Hey everybody, welcome to Hey Sawbones, my story, my passion. I'm your host, Dr. Ryan Molly, orthopedic surgeon, cutter of bones, entrepreneur, business owner, and most importantly, loving husband, father of three very young, very busy, active boys. And today I'm super excited. This is my guest that has traveled the furthest for one of these episodes. He's coming from Nashville, Tennessee. And I've known this particular guest for well over a decade. Our paths crossed back in, I think, 2012. Super exciting guy. He's got a lot of great stories, a lot of great history, and has become a fast friend of mine well over a decade ago. And we've grown very close. And he's from the orthopedic industry. That's kind of how I grew to know him. And without further ado, Matt Delong. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well, Ryan. Thank you.
Yeah. So had to come all the way from Nashville to come up here to do this, right?
Nashville is a wonderful, wonderful town. And we've been there probably 12 years now. An absolutely spectacular community. I grew up in the North. I guess we'll talk a little bit about that.
Yeah.
But I will tell you, if you haven't visited, Nashville is, for many reasons that go well beyond music, a wonderful place to go.
One of the fastest growing cities in the United States from everything I've heard and read. I mean, we've got Austin up there. We've got Nashville. We've got all these cities that are just booming. And I've been there several times in the past couple of years. The company that you work for and that I've used a lot of products over the years, their U.S. headquarters has moved there, Medacta. So the U.S. headquarters for Medacta. And but Matt Delong, where did you start? I mean, because we have a couple common threads there too.
We do. It's my story. I grew up in Columbus, Ohio, so I'm guilty of being a Buckeye, and yet I'm one of those people that's not guilty of going to Ohio State. Right? I'm part of the indoctrinated Buckeyes when you grow up in a community, but very, very large university, and I had aspirations to baseball. out of high school. And that was kind of, as an 18-year-old, kind of your identity, right?
Yeah.
You're going to school for a lot of reasons, but for some of us, kind of sports draws you there. And so started in Tiffin, Ohio, actually at Heidelberg College, a wonderful school, and then decided to transfer to Mount Vernon Nazarene University, which is in just outside of Columbus in Mount Vernon, Ohio. It was a wonderful experience, but graduated college with not a lot of vision for what was next. Right?
What was your degree when you were
It was in marketing and communications and business administration as well. So I gave baseball up when I realized that professional dreams were not what I was put on earth to realize, and eventually really buckled down academically. And so we finished there. The story really takes a twist, though. This was, the late 80s, and the job market was pretty tough, especially for young college grads. The economy was struggling a bit. It's when interest rates then, what we complain about today, was a pretty good rate back then,
Sure.
right? So just everything was a little bit tougher. And I got a call from an old friend in Warsaw, Indiana. And there's a small college there, and I was able to get basically an entry-level job. And I think
at a college?
At a college, yeah.
What college was
so
that?
it was Grace College. And,
Okay.
And it's Warsaw, but a little town called Winona Lake there. It didn't matter. It was work, right? But I think it's like where everything kind of lines up. Through working at Grace, then I was introduced to some people at a company that really doesn't exist in the same form anymore, but it was Biomed Orthopedics. And so for those of you that don't know, the orthopedic world, when we say orthopedic, obviously Ryan replaces joints and uses many different manufacturers. But this small town, 12,000 people, there were at one time 3 of the top 4 largest orthopedic manufacturers. Again, joint
So this is like Meadville, Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
size.
Very, very, very small town. So it doesn't make sense that this industry that has grown dramatically, right, as orthopedic care has expanded into so many different disciplines. But I was fortunate enough, not because of my orthopedic knowledge, but because somebody saw something in me to start working with Biomed many, many years ago. Again, incredibly unqualified, didn't have a foundation, but they saw something in me, right?
When was that? Give us a time frame.
Oh my gosh, now we're in the mid 90s now.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. So I think I was there for 16 years total, but really started amongst an amazing community of orthopedic professionals, and specifically at Biomed in those days. Had no idea the kind of environment that I was able to learn and kind of be reared in this industry. Probably wasn't as thankful for it until I got older, to be honest. It just was what it was. I was incredibly spoiled, and I think that any of the older Biomed employees that have scattered around the industry, if not retired by now, would attest to. It was something very special, and we probably didn't know what we had until it wasn't there anymore. And things did, and the world did change. And so after 16 years there, I had really fate stepped in the way, and I was introduced to some former Biomed employees, but then Medacta International that you mentioned, and that
Which
has
is
been
a Swiss-based
yeah,
company.
it's been 13 years, 12 plus now. So this has been quite the ride.
Approaching the same length of time that you were at Biomed.
Yeah.
It's almost like 2 different careers
Isn't
there.
that something? Yeah. It's well, 2 different careers doing a lot of the same things.
Yeah.
Certainly with Medacta being very much, I guess we would just simply say a kind of a startup company back then, especially here in the United States. And it's where you sign up for one job and you get 18 others. And you're young enough and dumb enough and willing to just kind of set the dial on go. And, 10 years later, 11 years later, you look back, like, man, I've been on go for a long time here.
Yeah.
But it both experiences, though, have been the honors of my life. There's no doubt about that. There's absolutely nothing that I would take back. And yet every day is still an opportunity for growth, right? So yeah, I've been in the
When did
industry
you start
for a
with
long
Medacta?
time.
What year was that?
So it would have been 2011.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I was introduced right around there too. I think, again, you and I think met in 2012.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah. Was 2012. It absolutely was. Now, you did your training with some surgeons that I had worked with previously. And we kind of had the same heritage for the types of products that we were exposed
Sure.
to. And so we connected. You were still in Michigan at that time.
Yeah.
And
Because I did my fellowship in
Novi,
Columbus.
Right?
Right. And I was there 2010, 2011, finished, came out and started practice in July of 2011
Yeah.
and moved back to Michigan, which is where I had done my residency. But, and then we met shortly, probably 6 months after that.
Yeah, and so one of the challenges that I had, and without being too technical on the products, it was really about a U.S. surgeon at this time was more newly introduced to the anterior approach, right, where you're kind of operating with the patient supine, laying on their back, as opposed to the way that we were all exposed, I think, through much of our training, where you lay the patient on their side and, go posterior, anterior.
And we're
lateral.
talking about hip replacement right now.
We're talking about hip replacement. And that was truly my focus at the time. But in the United States, especially because it was a technique that was a little bit more common in parts of Europe, specifically France.
Sure.
And, but it was kind of foreign to us.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that we at Medacta, I think, understood very well, but it was the demand was driving where we put our resources, but we were very small. You got to pick one thing, you got to do it really well, right? With a few people. And I think, again, in those days, there was so much excitement. There was maybe a fresh perspective, and we needed people that not only had been exposed to the anterior approach, but had a heart for teaching,
Right.
And I think that's where our relationship started to grow because, you had a heart for teaching, and all that could come together. There was only one problem. We were doing the anterior technique the way that we were trained, a lot different than maybe some of the resources that Medacta was providing.
Right. It wasn't quite the Swiss technique at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, we said, well, Ryan, we're going to grow on you. Right. And just let us kind of expose you to some of the tips and tricks. And I think over time, you really did incorporate a lot of what we were teaching. I think every doctor has their own little variation. So
For sure.
we'll agree. But I think we were able to grow together a lot more as we both kind of learned this new approach together. And I'll always be thankful for you. I mean, we were a small team, and you are a major part of that.
Well, before we came on air here, Matt and I had an opportunity to go have dinner together, and it was just nice to be able to kind of like rehash and look back. And it's hard to believe that it's been, 11, 12 years.
Yeah.
And because it doesn't seem like that long ago when I look back on it. But, that was when I first came out in practice. But I will always be forever grateful to my teachers in Columbus with Dr. Lombardi, Dr. Barron. Dr. Barron was the one that really introduced me to the anterior approach, but it was very, very different than the way that I currently do it. And then very shortly after I graduated fellowship is when we met. And I remember I was very young. I was very hard-headed. I was like, I don't need a table. I don't need this. I'm going to do it this way because this is how I was taught. And as I got out into the real world, I started to realize that there were definitely some specific advantages to incorporating some of the Medacta philosophies, and didn't take long when I incorporated pretty much all of the Medacta philosophies and started using the mobile leg positioner, I was very committed, dedicated to using a femoral elevator hook, which I had designed, a hook and used for several hundred anterior hips. And Medacta eventually kind of took that product on, and that was a fun project for me. But as time goes, you start to your skills develop, your technique improves, and I started to realize that I needed that less. And I started using the bump, which again, to a lot of people doesn't make a lot of sense, but we were trying to push the femur up when we drop the foot down to expose the femur when we're putting the stem in, which is quite honestly the hardest part of doing an anterior hip replacement. And then as I got more comfortable and more experience with that, I started using the bump less. I can't honestly remember the last time I did use the bump or the hook. And, we just started modifying things and we all kind of started doing this together, whether it was Frederick Lode, who's kind of the I would say the godfather of the anterior minimally invasive surgery, the AMAS technique for Medacta, and kind of designed that specific surgical approach and technique. And we've gotten to the point where we use very minimal releases, and then we modify it to where we changed our incisions from vertical to horizontal to the bikini style approach, and it's just been a fun process.
So, not to digress much, but do you use the bikini routinely, or do you use
100%?
Yeah,
I don't remember the last time I did a traditional. Just for our viewers out there, what he's referring to is a traditional anterior hip approach. And Jay, if you could maybe put right here just one of those little descriptions of, and I can supply you with some photos. The traditional approach was more vertically oriented, centered right over the main muscle group that we kind of go just on the inside of, which is the tensor fascia lata muscle. And so the incision was vertical. It was about maybe 4 inches long. And we would go truly intermuscular, not cutting any muscles, not detaching any muscles or tendons. And then about 3.5, 4 years ago, myself and my associate, Dr. Frednick, we switched to do a bikini approach where we literally turn the incision perpendicular to that. And it's allowed for much more cosmetic surgical technique, but more importantly, it significantly reduced our wound complications and our, superficial and deep infections, because that was the one real downside to doing the vertical approach, is that top part of the incision would really get beat up when people would sit and flex, because the incision would fold on itself.
Well, I think everything that we do. I mean, would you say hip replacement was the operation of the 20th century? Correct?
It's been termed that. Yeah, it's been the operation of the century, and quite honestly, it is the most successful operation that we do on planet Earth, second to none.
And especially the quality of life. But I mean, I can go back far enough to remember in joint replacement, and I'm going to make a point with this, but to go back when if grandma was having hip replacement surgery, right? There was it was a tragic fall. It maybe wasn't as routine for somebody that was simply uncomfortable and find themselves sitting in the chair a lot more because it just hurt to walk, but you just kind of adapt to it over the years.
Yeah.
Right? People would wait a lot longer. Right, the numbers, the commonality weren't there, and so we'll talk, the 80s, right? But grandma would have a hip replacement, and all of the kids or whoever was available would literally relocate for a couple months, right? I mean, she was in the hospital at least a week, right?
Bare minimum, yeah. Oftentimes going to rehab minimum. For maybe 3 or 4 weeks
but
after
I mean,
the operation.
This is along the lines of, and again, in the days where open heart surgery, I mean, that's not to minimize that procedure. It's not to minimize a hip replacement, but it fascinates me how we look back. And again, this is my lifetime, right? I mean, I remember these accommodations and the seriousness, the absolute life and death seriousness of needing this done to have any quality of life, right? Because we know when you lose that, especially physically, then life is not going to be what it could have been, right? But the answers weren't as easy nor readily available. Right?
Sure.
And so we talk about the different.
We certainly weren't doing same day hip replacements.
I mean, can you imagine? I mean, like in my youth, same day anything. Give me a break. right? Any operation was mega and critically important. And frankly, the success wasn't as guaranteed either, right? So many things that we take for granted. And you and I are talking about it, adjusting an incision. I mean, so you're talking about how do you improve the most successful surgical procedure of the 20th century now that we're in the 21st, right? And so those are the things that we work on. Those are the things that we work on together. All right? What are those little percentages now? Because it's not only incredibly safe, right? The access to it is very much there. Whether it's a hip, a knee, a shoulder, I mean, you name it, spinal procedures, right? As we see an ACL tear every Saturday in a football game, or every night on the TV, and we've had Aaron Rodgers with an Achilles tear,
and he's already
during
up
the
and
season. He's
around.
walking, and they're saying he may come back. In this season. These are the things that we try to focus on, right? And it's what we do, and I think it's what stimulates you to say, how can we get even better? I mean, now my grandma would arrive at 5 a.m. The procedure is going to be very efficiently shortly after that. And I'd just say at your clinic, right?
Yeah, I did 6 joints today, 3 hips, 3 knees. They all are home and have had dinner and probably are in bed at this point.
Right.
So,
and so,
it's a little after 7.
You look back and it just, in my career, which has been longer than yours, right? But what we were shooting for back in those days to what we are accomplishing today. And I'll say that as an industry, right? Because we all challenge one another. Okay. Everybody, it doesn't matter if it's the banking industry, if it's the auto industry, there's competition and you're going to compete. And we are all in business to make a living. Okay. That's not something to apologize for. And a lot of people work their tails off, right? You and your business, us and our business. But if you keep your eye on that, what's that percentage you're shooting for? How are we going to dream? How are we going to go there?
Yeah.
Right. That's what keeps you coming back for more. Now, at my age, obviously, I slip mentally more than I hit it, probably, right? But you figure after all the years, you gain, and I guess you pray for wisdom, and that's the best that we can do these days. But I am absolutely fascinated by what we've been able to accomplish together. And again, the orthopedic surgeon community. And the orthopedic industry.
No, it's been an extremely fun ride, and like I said, it just seems like it was yesterday, not 12 years ago. So thank you, my friend.
It's good stuff.
So you thirsty?
Yeah.
So as we all know, we do the beverage break, and I always ask my guests what they want. Well, Matt didn't get that luxury. I came down and I said, "Hey, Matt, you want an IPA?" He goes, "How about what you got that's not an IPA?" And I was like, so he's not an IPA guy. So we're going to do a Sam Adams winter lager. I mean, we're coming into the winter season. Right. I think it's going to be a nice, crisp, refreshing beer. And what we'll do is we'll start the interview process. And as we've talked about before, the process is 6 questions. You'll ask me 3 business, then 3 personal, and then we'll spin the tables and I'll do the same thing to you. I tell all my guests, you do have the ability to veto a question, but this is episode 19 of Hey Sawbones, and you would be the first person to ever veto a question. So,
well, goodness gracious. Thanks for
no pressure
on. Yeah.
So fire away.
Fire away. All right. One thing that I will emphasize is that this is very unscripted.
That's the whole thing about this particular podcast is there's no script. There's no notes. I'm not reading off cue cards. When I started this, my whole goal was to make this very genuine, very authentic. Matt was texting me last night. He goes, "One of my questions." And I said, "I don't want to hear." And he was totally messing with me, I hope, because if he asked me that question, I have no idea what he was even talking about. Marxism was one of the words. I said, "You're going to have to give me a vocabulary lesson before we start talking about that." But yeah, so unscripted. Cheers.
Cheers, bud. Thank you.
Fire away.
Fire away. Well, I mean, this could go many different directions. We'll start with the business, right?
Yeah.
So, and I guess I don't want to get too political, but I think you'll have some perspective on this. We're getting ready to enter that some people maybe they like this. I tend to shy away just a bit to all the coverage, but we're heading into an election cycle, right? And so obviously healthcare is going to be front and center. Now the conversations start, maybe some of the issues that we don't think about every day, they continue to come up. So as a small business owner, but even more than that, I think as a surgeon that has, great empathy for your patients, are there any subjects you're really looking for to be addressed that would maybe ensure healthcare would be there for your patients in 10 years, right?
Yeah. Quite honestly, this is and I'm an eternal optimist, but that being said, healthcare is in a very scary place, in my opinion. A lot of people out there, they realize that there's issues with healthcare. They realize that there's problems and room and opportunity to improve. But from my perspective, we're at the critical tipping point of where I think certain, and I'm not going to get too political with this, but certain sectors are trying to push more towards socialized medicine. And I really think that's where we're heading. And people may say, well, that's great. But I mean, just go a little north of here, ask our Canadian colleagues what they think of that. Because quite honestly, waiting 18 to 24 months for a hip or knee replacement, and I'm just talking about elective stuff, right? That doesn't sound too great. When I tell my patients I have a 5 or 6 month waiting period for a hip or knee replacement, they think that's horrible. And how could that be? And it's like, well, I'm doing as much as I can, but when you're waiting 18 to 24 months. So I do think that, and this boils down, I'm just going to be blunt and honest. It comes down to the insurance companies and, but it also comes down to the government, and it comes down to, Medicare and some of the precedents that they have set. Because if you ask any patient out there with any insurance plan that they have, I can assure you that over the past 10 years, their premiums have gone up and their deductibles have gone up and their coverage has gotten worse. And if you ask any provider out there, physician, PA, nurse practitioner, our reimbursements have gone down, and we are working harder and harder to be able to accomplish the same tasks with much more work attached to it. Whether it's getting authorizations for necessary operations or procedures, whether it's a huge strain, it's a huge burden. And if you ask the insurance, well, you don't need to ask the insurance companies, but if you just look, their profits have gone up, record profits every single year, up, whether it's United, Cigna, locally, we've got UPMC, we've got Highmark. It's a very big problem, and the tail is wagging the dog. I think what we're going to start to see, and what I hope that we start to see more of, is more direct payment models that allow patients to have more freedom, to take kind of the power out of the insurance company. Because what skin do they have in the game? They're not the ones that, at the end of the day, are in the trenches doing the work, taking the risks. They're the ones collecting the profits by increasing, like I said, deductibles and premiums, and paying the providers that are doing all the work less and less. And what that's doing is it's increasing the strain and burden on the healthcare providers. I mean, I've touched on this many, many times, whether it's on social media platforms or in this podcast. And we were talking a little bit about this earlier, is the amount of burnout in the healthcare industry, whether it's on your side or whether it's on the physician side. But the number one suicide rate now amongst professionals is physicians. And amongst physicians, 28% of them are orthopedic surgeons that are committing suicide. That's not a small problem, right? That is a very, very scary, real problem. And it's hard for me to kind of wrap my mind around that because I love what I do. It's hard and life's hard, right? But we need something. We need something to change. And I don't know if there's one party that's going to fix this. Maybe the bubble needs to burst, which is scary and maybe hard for a lot of people to hear. But I think there's going to be some big radical changes, maybe not necessarily promoted by any political entity, but I think the consumers, right? Consumers and small businesses are going to start looking for opportunities to say, you know what, I'm done with this. I'm done with these insurance companies that are going to increase our rates 25% every year when we haven't gotten 25% sicker. We haven't gotten 25% older, but you're going to increase this. It's becoming a significant burden financially to even provide those benefits to employees anymore. And then the quality of care and what it covers is getting worse and worse every day.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's funny that you mentioned that because I shared with you that we are launching our next podcast literally tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. It will launch before this launches. This will come out next week, Wednesday at 6 a.m. But Red Carpet Healthcare Solutions, and these are the exact things that we're talking about on that.
Mm-hmm. No, I appreciate it. You mentioned the kind of the model in Canada,
mm-hmm.
and do you see just with your location on the other side of the lake, do you see medical tourism? Kind of that opportunity within your practice? We
do. I will tell you, when I was in Michigan and Metro Detroit, I would see people coming over from Windsor because that was really close.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like a 15-minute drive.
Sure.
But it is becoming much more common, and these patients are looking for it. And quite honestly, they're willing to pay cash to come and get it done, 2 years before they could get it done in their own country. And I don't blame them. I mean, because the quality of care is excellent, and the ability to get it done significantly quicker so that they can live their lives, because life is short.
Mm-hmm.
If you had a debilitating hip or knee condition and you knew that it was going to take you 2 years to be able to get that fixed, that some people may not even be willing to live any longer for that.
Oh, I mean, I think that's very real.
Mm-hmm.
That's absolutely real. Another point, you talked about the suicide rate with doctors. I mean, I read someplace recently where it's alarmingly high for nurses as well.
Yeah.
It's just the overall stress burden. But you all are kind of in a similar fight, different, but very similar.
Yeah.
Right. But the stress level to go with the obvious challenges for all of you.
Yeah, and COVID did not make it any easier.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, no doubt.
I mean, people were pressed to the limit with nursing shortages, physician shortages, other ancillary staff shortages, and care was compromised.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, well, and hopefully lessons learned, right? And certainly well beyond healthcare. But I mean, I think the world got a wake up call, and we'll see how we deal with it. I mean, it's ongoing.
Fingers crossed. Right?
Fingers crossed, no doubt about it. So,
yeah. What else?
we were talking a little bit earlier about maybe some of the advancements, right? I was introducing myself, and then we end up on the history of Warsaw, Indiana.
Sure.
And ultimately, I swear I live in Nashville, like we said earlier.
Yeah.
But from a business perspective, as we do continue to chase those incremental percentages, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have unbelievable perspective on the history of the development, maybe what the future is in hip replacement and knee replacement, right? Let your crystal ball go 10 years. What do you think some of the key issues are going to be 10 years from now? And again, the joint, the practice of joint replacement for you, and what patients may expect at that time.
Yeah. So for me, I think there's a lot of different avenues you could take here, whether it's going to be the technological advancements, whether it's robotics, augmented reality, virtual reality, navigation, whether it's, and those are real, and there's definitely advantages to that. Although I'm relatively young, I just turned 45, I'm kind of in that mid portion of my career, but I would consider myself a more old-fashioned, more conventional surgical technique kind of guy. I like very good classic surgical technique, and I would take that any day over a robot or any type of technological advancements. I'm not saying that they don't have value. That's not what I'm saying. But the other things, and this is where I focus my energy and where I see things going, is the true experience for the patient, right? Joint replacement surgery, when you were originally talking about it back in the 1980s, and grandma having her hip done, and a lot of these people would either get blood clots or they get infections or they get pneumonia because they were so debilitated and confined to a bed for so long. Where now we're doing same day surgery. Patients are going home, in my practice, 95% of the time, the same day. I think a lot of it becomes the experience. So for me, I think educating patients prior to surgery, I think doing anything and everything we can to help modify and hopefully minimize the postoperative pain. And that oftentimes includes and requires doing things much before we cut their skin. It's preemptive analgesia. Whether it's for knees, we're doing iovera treatments, cryoneurolysis, whether it's the blocks that anesthesia is doing, whether it's the blocks that we're doing. I'm constantly trying to change and modify my surgical technique. Just within the past 7 to 8 weeks, I started doing all subvastus knee replacements, partials and totals, which prior to that I was doing a medial parapatellar. So just what that means for you guys is a standard total knee approach requires cutting a very big tendon or the most powerful muscle that helps to control the kneecap, the patella. It's called the vastus medialis oblique. And we would detach that from the kneecap and we would cut up into the quad tendon or cut into that muscle itself. And there is a way, just like we do direct anterior hip replacements, where we can do this truly minimally invasive without cutting the muscles, without cutting the tendons, without detaching the muscles or the tendons, called a subvastus surgical approach. It's a learning curve. It has slowed me down slightly, not significantly, maybe 5 minutes longer per case, but I do believe that that's going to reduce pain. I think it's going to improve function. It's going to improve ability for patients to get up and down stairs easier. I think it's going to improve what we call the patellofemoral kinematics, the way that the kneecap sits in the patellar groove when you flex or extend the knee. It's going to certainly improve the vascular or the circulation of the patella. So there's all these advancements in surgical technique, in the technological advancements that we do with our postoperative pain control or preoperative analgesia. But to me, it's about the experience for these patients. And my goal has always been and always will be to make this, as weird as this may sound, as enjoyable as possible. And most people wouldn't think of an invasive surgical procedure as enjoyable, but I want to make it as least anxiety provoking as possible.
Wow. And I think probably now more than ever, I would say people are kind of prepared for the experience better, right?
For sure.
There's a lot larger volume of people that you can get the good and the bad stories, right? I mean, I think one of the great misnomers, and of course, I'm not an orthopedic surgeon, but working in the orthopedic industry, every person I come in contact with that's not in the industry thinks I'm like, it must be as good as a doctor. I mean, what's your opinion? What should I this? What should I that? Right? As far as products, as far as doctors, and we have all the answers. At the end of the day, where we need somebody that approaches this, I think, very traditional, like you, and has a wonderful pool to draw from. But one of the first things that you and I worked on together was you were very committed to, as a young surgeon, introducing yourself to the community, right? You were in Novi, Michigan at that point, and you really had a heart and a desire to start reaching out to the community, right? And started, I think, that in your way, and it was certainly a learning process, but you would put on seminars at various restaurants, I think, up there. And it started off, I'm sure, very small, and then it grew and it grew and it grew, right? And I know you've continued that in your practice for many, many years.
to this day. And until I retire, I will continue to do that.
My question is going to be this, though, and I guess I'm calling this a business, but it's a life question as well. I think you've bought into preparing the patient as best you can, which to me is probably more than 50% of the challenge, right? Getting that patient prepared for that procedure and all the steps that you go through to get there. And there are tons of education, but education and mental state, that doesn't supersede diet preferences and things like that, right? So over the years, what have you done to try to find that balance? And maybe what do you suggest when it doesn't mean that somebody's obese either? I mean, they can be incredibly unhealthy. You know it, and you don't want to schedule or do their joint replacement until such a time that you have confidence that other physical ailments might be under control. What have you done over the years to adjust any kind of dietary recommendations?
Yeah. So, I mean, this has been a push, I think, in the past probably 5 to 7 years, not just from my practice, but other colleagues of mine, where we've looked at these patients and, again, there's external pressures and stressors, right? Like patients don't like complications. When there is a complication, say an infection, a this, or that, it always tends to be the surgeon's fault, right? And what they fail to realize is that this is a relationship, just like anything. It's not generally one person's fault. And quite honestly, and I'm not just saying this because I'm a surgeon, but quite honestly, a lot of the times it's outside of our hands, and I call it protoplasm. So it's kind of how that patient takes care of themselves, whether they're drinking Mountain Dew and eating Cheetos for breakfast, or eating Twinkies, or smoking, or their diabetes is out of control. So one of the big pressures from insurance companies is like, well, if you return to surgery within 90 days, you're not getting paid anymore to fix this problem, whether it's your problem or not. It is my problem. I have to fix it, but it may not be my fault. So, and I don't do anything defensively. I don't do things because I don't want to have financial penalties or this or that. I do things because I want to optimize these patients and really see them succeed. And I do want to minimize those potential downsides, because trust me, the worst thing in the world is when a patient comes in with any type of complication, whether it's a mechanical complication, a biological complication, an infection, and I have to coach them, counsel them. So we created a wellness institute, and we address all those things actually before surgery. They don't actually ever meet me until they've met certain strict criteria, whether it's BMI, body mass index, which is a ratio between your height and your weight, nutritional status. We look at blood markers such as albumin, pre-albumin, to make sure that you're in a safe range to proceed with surgery. We look at we look at smokers, and if you're a smoker, I'm sorry, I don't do your surgery until you've quit smoking. And we don't just say stop smoking and come back once you've stopped, or lose weight and come back when you've lost weight, or get your diet under control and come back when that's happened. We actually are now helping them do that. Same thing with diabetes. We're giving them the tools. We're coaching them. We have an institute that does that, the Wellness Institute, and I hired an entire staff to do that. Bridget Scullin, she's our nurse practitioner. She heads that up. She sees 100% of our patients before surgery. And if we see these higher risk patients, she even sees them before we even meet them. And then we have a couple other staff that work alongside Bridget to ensure that this is happening, so that people aren't slipping under the radar and getting on our surgical schedules. And then we have these potential complications or disasters. So it's extremely important. It's one of my lifelong missions, and one of the main reasons that I named my practice Whole Health, is truly looking at more than just their orthopedic needs.
That's awesome. So now we transition to the personal questions.
Yeah. So fire away.
Let me get a sip first. This part, this is gonna get fun now, isn't it?
Yeah, this is the fun stuff.
Okay. I can't tell you how stoked I've been, I think, at different times over the last year plus, that, like, I think it was Mega Millions and Powerball, like, both went over $1 billion, right? And so I don't care who you are, right? you kind of like, man, I gotta get a couple tickets, right?
Okay.
And I'm not a big gambler, but
Yeah.
and then you kind of get stoked. You're like, man, is this what would I do? What if somebody's going to win,
Right.
right? So the question's this: you win $1 billion in the lottery, right? What do you do? How do you react to that? And the second part of it is that a blessing or a curse?
Wow. I was wondering where the heck you were going with this when you started that question out. So,
Yeah.
first and foremost, I probably wouldn't change a whole lot.
Yeah.
I'm not moving. I'm not moving my family. I'm living here. I'm going to stay in this house. I'm probably going to travel more. I'm absolutely going to start some foundations and probably devote a lot of that towards education for people that are less fortunate and don't have those opportunities, whether it's scholarships, whether it's maybe even opening a school. My wife is a teacher. My whole family, father was a teacher in Meadville for 31 years. My three older sisters are all teachers to some degree. Aunts are teachers. So that's huge to me as education. But the financial security, I would definitely help those out around me, whether it's my family, my friends. I would do some mission work. I would still operate because I really enjoy and love what I do, but I probably would scale back a bit because it's tough. It is physically very demanding. And, there's going to come a point in my career where I'm going to have to slow down, and it would allow me to do that a little sooner than natural history would play out. But I wouldn't change a whole lot. I would still, again, live where I live, do what I do, but I would definitely travel more because that's one of the things that Karen and I love to do. And I would definitely give back to local communities and more needing communities globally.
So you're on one of your jets, and travel is going to be an option. Like, what's that ultimate spot you haven't been to yet?
Oh, haven't been to yet. So I've been all over Europe. You and I were talking about that a little bit earlier. Definitely want to get to Japan at some point, but I really want to go to South America. There's a lot of cool countries down there that I've just never been to. I love nature, so I'd love to go see the rainforests. But I also would love to go to, say, Argentina and Costa Rica, and just those kind of exotic yet tropical, but yet very nature oriented locations. Because I love hiking and just getting out and getting fresh air into my lungs and sweating during a good hike, and just seeing just different cultures too. I love cultures and animals that I've never been exposed to, except for snakes. You can keep the snakes. Yeah,
I'll tell you. But that jet, again, with your $1 billion, you're going to get to wherever you want.
Yeah.
So, especially in the Caribbean. You guys like the Caribbean too, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Is it Caribbean or is it Caribbean?
I think I used to say Caribbean. Like if you're going to do a Caribbean cruise, maybe you would say that. But I would say if I'm going to go there, I would say I'm going to the Caribbean.
Yeah, that's more proper in the islands.
I think so.
Okay, well that's cool. But again, you'll be able to get there on your jet.
Yeah.
Again, this is with $1 billion. I'll tell you what.
Pipe dreams, Matt.
For me, I'll just interject. There's going to be a large lake property, right? Duly positioned to get either the best sunrise or sunset, right?
You could do both.
Yeah. And then on this lake where I don't have a pier space, I just pull a yacht up and then do everything kind of off the yacht, just to kind of stand out, right? Just because you can, right?
Yeah.
But it would be a peaceful life. But I think if anybody says that they wouldn't give more than they got, then I think that becomes concerning.
Yeah.
Right? You know, it's like, where does this,
What are you going to
where
do
does
with all
this
that money,
drive?
right?
Yeah, exactly. What more? But the other part, is it a blessing or a curse?
Yeah. I mean, quite honestly, I think it's probably more of a curse than a blessing.
Yeah.
Because you want to help people, but then there's going to be people coming to you asking for help that maybe you don't either believe need help, or you don't think that they're going to do good things with that money, right? Whether it's getting into drugs or whatever, or gambling or this or that. And you just become a target.
Mm-hmm.
And the older I get, the more I really appreciate my privacy and just being home with my family and not necessarily being out and about. So, you know, I would almost not want people to know.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So that's why I almost said, like, I wouldn't change a whole lot,
Mm-hmm.
at least on the surface.
Yeah. I guess it'd be a good problem to have. It's probably not going to happen.
Yeah.
Right? But
Odds are you and I aren't
what
winning the Powerball.
Probably not. But I'm also at that phase of life when you say, you know, what's enough? What's enough?
Yeah.
Right. What are your priorities? Right. And I don't know. I think the older you get, the less you say it's money.
Oh, for
Right.
sure. And the more you realize that can create more stress and problems and strife than what you thought when you were in your 20s.
Yeah.
Right. I
Yeah,
mean, some of the happiest people I've ever met live the most simple lives, and they have very, very little stress in their life.
Yeah. No, absolutely. All right. If you're comfortable, describe the hardest thing that you've had to overcome in your professional life.
In my professional life, hardest thing I've ever had to overcome.
Well, we could say life. It's,
Yeah. Wow. Gosh, let me think about that a little bit. You know, I've had a lot of challenges in my life, whether it was academically or whatnot. But the more I think about it, and this is going to sound probably a little arrogant, but when I look back on it, none of it was really as hard as I thought it was at the time.
Hmm.
Maybe I underestimate it now, but maybe the current, it's just because once you get through something, maybe you just inherently think it was easier than what it really was, right? Like when I look back on like just getting into an orthopedic residency, that at that moment, that seemed like the hardest thing in the world to me. And then when I got in, maybe I just went a little crazy in my mind and just said, wow, that wasn't that hard. But I would say starting a practice kind of from scratch and building it and just dealing with people and staff and getting through a pandemic, like doing all that kind of in that little period of time has been pretty challenging. But at the same time, I've been so blessed with amazing staff members and teammates to help me accomplish that. You know, whether it was relocating from Michigan to Pennsylvania, that wasn't that difficult. You know, I think moving from an acute care hospital setting to a physician-owned hospital setting, there was certain challenges and struggles with that. But at the end of the day, was by far and away the best decision I ever made. Although there was those challenges there. So Matt, that's a tough thing. Maybe my week-long fast was my. I'm kidding, but
no, I think your point is actually made pretty well. You know, there are a lot of hurdles in life.
Yeah.
And as the hurdle's approaching, you're kind of dreading it. Hey, do I have what it takes to get over? Right? I can't touch it. I can't touch this hurdle. I have to get over it. And I don't think I can. Right? And you do, and you grow. And then the next thing comes up. And that's what life is, right? It's these.
And you get over that hurdle, and that hurdle didn't seem so high anymore.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. Right. But at the time,
I feel like it's probably the most current thing.
Yeah.
Is probably the hardest thing that you're dealing with, because you're dealt with obstacles and you're saying, how do I do this? You know, you're going to get through it because I always found a way, right? Where there's a will, there's a way. I never give up. But it's usually the most current thing, I would say.
No, I think it's very fair. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right.
Want to flip the tables here?
Let's go for it, my man.
Okay. So professionally.
Yeah.
All right. So I've known you in the Medacta world. I know that you were with Biomet for a very long time, but you mentioned when you first moved to Warsaw, you worked for a college. So who was the individual that is there one person that you can say got Matt Delong into the orthopedic industry? Was there one person, or was it a group of people that allowed that opportunity to arise?
So, if we kind of rewind to earlier, and I'm 21 years old. I moved from Columbus, Ohio. So not quite the Columbus it is today, but it was still a major city.
Yeah.
Right. And I moved to a very small town in northern Indiana where I know nobody, anybody. Okay. And I'm making no money, but it was inconsequential. I had insurance. I was able to pay I think it was $170 a month rent. I had a computer, which in those days was not that common, right? I had to teach myself. I graduated from college, no kidding, outside of using an electric typewriter, if I was so fortunate, okay? All of my papers were done on typewriters. I used an Apple, one of the original Apple computers.
Like an Apple IIe?
Yeah, as a
green screen.
As a word processor. And it was the most fascinating thing ever that I didn't have to use whiteout, right? I mean, so you go back, right? And so this is the days before cell phones, the days before the internet, right?
You had a dot matrix printer and you had to peel the sides of the paper off.
But and long distance phone calls cost real money.
Yeah.
Per minute, right?
Yeah, no cell phones.
So when I say I'm this 21-year-old kid and I'm relocating to Warsaw, Indiana, you did not have the ability to touch your foundation quite the way that you do today.
Yeah.
So it was cutting the cord, and I immersed myself in the job there, and it was easy to do because I was working with spectacular people, being molded just in life in general in a very good community, right? But I was able to kind of navigate and meet several people. But so there are two people responsible for me, right? One, his name was Mark Weinstein, and he was a graduate of Grace College in Warsaw, Indiana, but he worked at the university that I went to, Mount Vernon, and he basically set me up to get the job in Warsaw at the college. His recommendation and the fact that if a kid was going to work for that little of money, then let's hire him. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, so really, I was living by the skin of my teeth. But Mark has since gone on in various functions and colleges and universities across the country. But, you think that simple act of kindness, just somebody looking out for a kid with no experience, likes him, right? Is your mentor in college. And I worked, my student job in college was kind of in the university relations area, right? So all small schools have to have a fundraising wing.
Sure.
It's how they survive. And there was also the marketing and public relations element of that department. And that's where my student job was there. And so that's where some of the skills start getting going. And so Mark got me to Warsaw, right? It was just a job for a 21-year-old kid.
Sure.
And I thank him endlessly for that, because it's all the things that come from that you can't possibly see. All those hurdles we were just talking about, right? That it starts a chain reaction that becomes the absolute blessing of your life, right? I put myself in position and got to know some people in the orthopedic industry, but I honestly at the time thought orthopedics must mean ankle braces and knee braces, right? I had no concept of joint replacement.
Sure.
Right? I had no idea what these big companies were doing. But I saw an ad in a newspaper for an engineering role. Now, and so engineers are the ones that actually would typically go into surgery with you, and Ryan will give ideas on instruments or implants, and they listen and then interpret that by designing these products and these instruments. I was clearly not an engineer, but I was a stupid, cocky kid. And I thought, well, I'll apply for it. Why not? Got a nice form letter back to Biomet, by the way, and got a nice form letter back that said, thanks. We'll put your resume on file. Now, come on, does anybody ever put your resume on file? So about 8 months later, I actually get a call, and they said, hey, we were going through your resume on file. So, wow, okay, these people really are kind of into this. It wasn't a form letter. And we'd like to talk to you about a job in product management. And I'm like, oh, that ankle brace, knee brace company called me. Why not? It's got to pay better than what I got now. I mean, literally, that's your mindset at that point. Because in your apartment, the gas range is getting a little bit old, and you want to be able to afford a microwave, which again, back in those days was spectacular.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm like, I'll go interview. I mean, why not? I had no idea what the product was. I had no sciences in my background, but hey, bring it on. And so I go through the interview process, and there was a gentleman there, and I'll mention him at Biomet, and he ran the hip department at that point. His name was Jeff Glock. And Jeff is still up in the Warsaw, Indiana area. But going through the interview process, I said, it was something to the effect of, what? They offered me the job. I said, why would you offer me this job? I don't have any of the medical background that clearly you all need. Okay. I'm a fair marketing guy, I guess, but why me? And he said, I can teach you anything. He said, I'm much more concerned with the person than I am the skill set coming in here. We will teach you orthopedics, right?
Yeah.
We
it's
want the right
easy
person.
part, right?
And Jeff was the one that gave me, for no reason in the world, my profile did not fit a career in orthopedics, right? And again, I didn't even know what they did, truly.
Yeah.
Okay. But he saw something in me, and I'll be forever grateful.
Well, that's what we need. Sometimes just getting those opportunities, and we all have those handful of people that allowed us to get to where we are. So
yeah.
Thank you, Jeff Glock, and thank you, Mark.
Mark Weinstein. Yeah.
So what about, I like asking, I've asked this probably 2 or 3 times previously on the podcast. What's Matt Delong's superpower professionally? Do you have like one quality that you feel really allows you to be who you are and the best Matt Delong version that you are professionally?
I think if there's any superpower that I've had in my career, right? And sometimes there's those hurdles to get over, right? But it's been passion. That's it. I mean, I'm still, once I got in with no experience into the industry, and started to understand what we were doing, it's like, and I swear to you, this is a fact to this day, I'm fascinated at the small little sliver of role that I have in helping restore patients' ability to get their life back, right? And that sounds so noble, and it's the right thing to say and all that, but it still tickles me to death when I hear of the life-changing experiences that my industry has developed, that you, the orthopedic surgeon community, have developed. I'm passionate about that. I think it's really, really cool. I am absolutely passionate about the thousands of relationships that I've been able to build on so many different levels, right? It's that professional experience that you have where you say, I might make an impact here, right? And you kick yourself over and over, at least I have, on opportunities I've had to make an impact and maybe just kind of backed away,
Sure.
And that's where that passion kind of works against you, right? Because you do remember those moments, but I'm passionate about the people that we have the honor of working with. And in my life, right, it is more on that supplier type side,
Sure.
right? And so, but there are people, and I remember years ago going out on the shop floor, where they're making the implants, they're making the instruments, and this is some pretty important stuff. And taking a pack of cigarettes to a guy to kind of change the machine to help me out here for a while, right? And then you always have that story, right? So it's the manufacturing folks. It's all the folks that I've had the honor and the privilege of working with over the years, and then the unique honor of trying to create a foundation for a really small company and Medact and kind of start that stuff up, right? I mean, I'm not the best at anything, but I think my passion comes through, and that's what I want to leave with somebody, because I'm not the smartest.
Yeah.
I'm surely not the best at what we do, but maybe passion can overcome a lot of that.
Yeah.
That's what I call it, a superpower.
What would you say your least favorite part of your day-to-day job is?
The least favorite part of my day-to-day job, I don't, there's curses and blessings, right? And I think we really need to focus more on the blessing side of any uncomfortable situation that we're put in. I'll speak in generalities.
Yeah.
If
I'm not asking for people's names or anything like that.
No. But
is there situations where you're just like, God, I just really don't enjoy this part?
So in our case, right? I know that if passion was my superpower, and for the majority of my career, I've been responsible for products that have full-blown marketing behind them, and you better be passionate, to kind of push that along, right? And so my identity was this product guy, right? You give me the mission, and if I believe in it, and if these things are clinically relevant and clinically impactful, you're not going to find somebody more passionate.
Mm-hmm.
As the years have gone on, right, I'm not that focused product guy anymore. I got a little bit of everything, And so as your team grows, it becomes more of a challenge, right? Especially when you started as, in essence, in a one little space, a one-man show, and then it grows around you, all the areas in product management and product development that we're trying to establish here. So the hardest thing, and again, I can't say that you dislike it, but it's growing the community and dealing with the challenges that come along with that, right? Because I don't care how you could be the cockiest person in the world, and frankly, I don't care what people think, but learning to become and developing the instincts of a manager, right, it's an ongoing challenge. And the biggest challenge are just the generational differences that you have to deal with, because somebody that was 18 6 years ago, they look at the world different than somebody who was 18 years ago.
Yeah.
Right. And so, adapting to that challenge and still trying to be that passionate leader, right? It's this constant study on personality styles, right? Which is not all bad, right? Because, look, we all have those challenges in our families as we grow. Goodness, I have 10 grandchildren now, right? And so there's quite the generation gap. How do I learn to speak to these kids in a way that they're going to understand, right? Instead of the old school stern upbringing that I had, and you probably had.
Oh
too,
my God. Yeah,
right? It's a different world, and how can we adapt to it without compromising everything? Because that's not an option,
for sure.
right?
So that's going to segue into the personal stuff,
Okay.
right? So you talk about your grandkids, your wife, your children. What's your favorite thing to do with your family? Say you have a week vacation. Favorite place to go? Favorite things to do during that week?
Yeah, it's, we do have somewhat of a tradition, but of course, the older everybody gets, it becomes a little bit tougher. But, that ultimate time for us is our happy place is a lake, right?
Remember you telling me that?
Yeah, and we spend as much time as possible at a lake it's down south of Nashville, and actually it's by Lynchburg, Tennessee. So it's an amazing area for the history of whiskey and Tennessee whiskey. Excuse me, I better state that. But every year around the 4th of July, we'll always be on the lake for a week, and the kids will come when they can, and with growing families, it becomes ever more of a challenge to have all the calendars line up.
Is it just like your peaceful place?
There's no doubt about it. It is heaven on earth for us. And now, we were lake people when we were living in Indiana.
I was going to say, I remember you had a place up there too.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about Warsaw, and people think, who would live in Warsaw and this and that. And it is a very small town in the middle of nowhere. Let's call it what it is. And for some of you that don't know, Warsaw, let's say Fort Wayne is.
So Jay can put a nice little map right here. And
about an hour to the south east, and then South Bend is about an hour to the northwest, right? And it sits right about in the middle of that. But what a lot of people don't realize is there's, in that county, and it's called Kosciuszko County, there's 100 lakes, right?
Wow.
Now, some of them are maybe glorified ponds, and some of them are pretty good sized lakes. And so we were on a lake up there, Lake Wawasee, and it gets in your blood, right? Now, the difference between Indiana lakes, at least the ones that were around us, there was a house every 7 feet, right? So, lakes back in the day, they started off, people would have double wides out there, little cabins, right? But it wasn't this picturesque, the home inventory suite from realtor.com.
Sure.
But that was kind of Indiana, right? Every square foot was taken, and the lakes weren't as big. In Tennessee, and where we go, is called Tim's Ford Lake. And this thing has hundreds of miles of shoreline. It's probably 22, 23 miles from the west to the east. And so it's massive, but a lot of it's protected as well. And so you have a lot of coves where you can get privacy anchored down, just kind of be in your own world. There's plenty of room.
Do you guys have a place there, or do you guys rent a place down
there?
there?
We rent a place down
Okay.
there. Yeah. But, and again, it's an easy drive for us as well, not too far from the house. So that's absolutely our happy place. And anytime we can have our kids and grandkids, it's obviously a pretty mega bonus.
Oh yeah. I've always loved the lake life too. So if you were not doing what you're doing in the orthopedic industry, what would Matt Delong do professionally?
Oh, wow. That's a great question, because I think one of the things that I'll do when I am done is probably nothing for a short period of time. But I don't know that when you do what we do for so long, I think this sedentary lifestyle sounds pretty good for a while, right? But I don't know that that's doable long term. If finances weren't part of the equation, right? I would absolutely give as much of my time, and it does play into my family story a little bit, but as much of my time as possible in a service, and where my heart is in a service to underprivileged children. It is our eyes have been open to a lot of the challenges, but underprivileged children, and then there's something else that's very heavy on my heart: the human trafficking that's going on, the industry that exists. When you see what's happening in the world, right? You can't unsee it, right? So my time would be dedicated in some way, shape, or form, whatever was appropriate for me, to serving those types of causes.
Mm-hmm. So, final personal question. If you had to give, I asked you kind of the professional who kind of got you to where you are. You named two people. But Matt Delong, the human being, any tributes you'd like to shout out there to who really helped to bring you and make you the person that you are, the man that you are? Taking the professional side out of it completely. Just the things that you just mentioned with underprivileged children and, how important family time is to you. Who was that helped to instill that in you?
Well, I have to say my mother and father. I mean, they're the greatest influence that I could ever hope for. It might be cliche, but it is what it is. I mean,
Be the same answer for me.
Yeah, I look back at all the times. Now, my brother is a bit older than me. My sister's in the middle, and I'm the baby, right? And apparently, I got away with a lot of things that they never could, right?
That's what all older siblings
I think
say. I'm the baby too. So
yeah, but at the end of the day, I didn't care, right? But I look back at I was willing to listen, I think, and I think my parents would agree with that. Didn't mean I always acted in the right way. But I look back at the number of times where, a small nudge from them is a small nudge, right? Sometimes obviously they're major, but they keep you on the right track, right? They help establish the right foundation. They give you a compass to go by. And I consider that compass and my father's lessons and my mother's lessons on a daily basis. And so there's no greater influence than that, right? And yet, if I were to name one person professionally, right, I honestly couldn't do it because there's so many people have poured so much into me, whether I deserved it or not. And so, I've received far more grace than I deserve from so many people, whether it's existing employees now or people that have passed on in life. You start to see these generations move along that have even impacted your professional career. I honestly couldn't call out a single person, but there are a lot of them, and I can see them all, right now. But a community is responsible, at least from my perspective.
Yeah. Hey, as they say, it takes a village, right?
Oh,
so
for sure.
I think that's pretty much. I would echo those same statements. Obviously, mom and dad are number one for me, but my sisters, just the community I grew up into. So, let's change it up here. We're going to do the seventh inning Sawbones shoe stretch. So for those out there, maybe this is your first episode, maybe it's your 18th episode or 19th episode. I think this is episode 19. It is. But I asked my guests to wear, either their favorite shoes or a pair of shoes that have special meaning to them. So what are you wearing tonight, Matt?
Well, I've got the On Cloud. I don't even remember exactly what I think it's called Swift or something like that. I'm not quite the shoe person you are.
Yeah.
Right. My experience with shoes, I was the guy on a business trip. This is probably 5 or 6 years ago to Florida. And I noticed that the sole had peeled back on my shoe, and I pulled into a Macy's and I got the cheapest pair of black shoes that I could. And I wore those another 5 years. So I'm not the best shoe person, but tennis shoes have always been an issue, right? So I
Like
had
a good issue?
Yeah, like my foot would literally fall asleep at different times, right?
Okay.
So probably had too narrow shoes, but Reebok, Nike, right? It just for whatever reason it was never comfortable. Now more running shoes, not necessarily basketball shoes.
Sure.
But I haven't had that stuff since high school. You know?
Right.
So that's just not what I purchased. It was more running and endurance and comfort shoes. I got the On Cloud. Look, I know they're flying off the shelves, right? It's a really popular brand.
Yeah, for sure.
These things are like walking on a cloud, I'm telling you. So I had to wear these. It's the best tennis shoes.
Are these kind of your travel shoes now?
Travel shoes? Well, look, buddy, at my age, whatever goes on your foot.
No, but I'm saying because you travel a lot, right? So like you're walking through airports.
For sure. I'm sorry.
That's what I meant by travel shoes.
Yeah.
Is that what you're wearing when you're maybe not going into business, but getting from point A to point B?
Absolutely. Oh, yeah, most definitely.
Yeah,
Most definitely.
They're-
They're like a really trendy shoe too.
they're extremely trendy. I have a pair. I just wish I would have got them a half size bigger because my pair are just a little small for my foot.
See, I think these must have a little bit of extra width, or at least they have options, which is what I got, and I think maybe that's probably why they're.
Well, they just look very comfy too.
They are.
It's more of like a elastic material.
Yeah. So I love these kicks.
How many pairs of On Clouds do you have?
2.
Yeah,
I got 2 pair.
So these are the Air Jordan 1 Lows, which is by far and away the most popular version of the Air Jordans I have. But these are called the SE Low Craft. Sean McKinnon, actually, my business manager, was wearing these one day in the clinic. I said, man, I like those. And I have a ton of shoes, almost 50 pairs of Jordans now, and I didn't have these. And I said, where'd you get those? And he sent me the link on it. So as always, super comfortable. I think the Jordan 1 Lows are kind of made for my foot for what that is worth. They just are super duper, kind of like you said, super duper comfortable. I wear them pretty much every clinic, and they just fit my foot well. Mm-hmm. So, and as we were sitting down here looking for shoes, he's like, yeah, I think those work because you got a little gray on, you got a little black on. So, but that being said, the next section that we always do, I think I want to do something a little different tonight. It's called the Sawbones Challenge, and it has historically been some type of competitive challenge. We've done outdoor 3-point competitions. We're obviously not doing that because it's dark outside. We've got pretty much a sport court down here. We've got the basketball rim. We've got the Papa Shot. We've got foosball. But I almost want to do something a little bit different. So you were asking me earlier about who's my favorite college football team, right? I'd like to and I've done this with a couple guests, but it's been all NBA based. How about professional football? Do you follow?
I follow as far to keep up with my fantasy team.
Okay.
And then you're bound to pick up a few.
But historically, so can you give me what we've done in the past is we've done kind of like you give me your top 5 basketball players, point guard, shooting guard, and I'm going to give you my top 5, and then we have to play against each other, like who would win, right? And but I'd like to do something similar. We're not going to do 12 players, but like let's do a quarterback, let's do a running back, maybe a wide receiver, a tight end, and then we'll give you 2 defensive players too. So I'm going to let you go first. We'll alternate back and forth. So
all right. So what am I?
We'll start with the QB position.
So start with the QB, and so we're talking active.
No, we're talking all time.
It's a historical.
Yeah, it could be active or all historical.
Okay.
And your team's going to play my team. So again, we'll do quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, and then 2 defensive players.
And I get the first pick.
You get first pick.
I'm going to take Tom Brady, the quarterback. Yeah.
Pretty good player. Oftentimes considered the GOAT, and I would consider him the GOAT as well.
He's pretty good. I mean, you know how painful that is for me to even pick him?
Yeah, because we know where he went to college.
Where he went to college, yeah. And
which he was mediocre at best there, right?
it doesn't matter, right?
So who am I going to go with?
Most folks that play there have been mediocre. Except,
Pete, I hope you're watching this.
Yeah, but Pete, the reality is the one that was exceptional was the video team. Right?
Ooh,
I mean that
a
was
little
next
fresh.
level.
Boom.
That was next level. All right. So anyway, I get Brady.
Okay, so you got Brady. My initial instinct when I knew you were going to probably take him was like, well, who am I going to take that can even compete with him? And my first one would be, and this is not my actual guess, but it would have been Peyton Manning. Doesn't have nearly the championships. So I'm going to go with somebody that I think Tom really idolized and I think can really compete back in his prime. I'm going to go with Joe Montana.
Yeah, I think it's a logical number 2.
Yeah.
Right. Because the two names that popped into my head were.
Yeah, I'm going Joe.
Yeah. Okay.
So
That's very fair.
now we'll go running back, but I get the
running
first
back?
running
But-
back.
okay.
We'll alternate back and forth.
Okay, I know exactly who you're going to take, so I need to.
You do? Because I don't know who I'm going to take yet.
Oh, very good.
Gosh, running.
I'm going to release the mind meld, so you're on your own.
So running back of all time, man, he doesn't have any of the accolades other than just pure skill. I gotta go with Barry Sanders.
I see that is exactly now, but I was drawing a Detroit line there, right? So
Okay.
I thought,
But I'm a Steelers fan. But
you're a
Steelers
Steelers fan, and I
just give that guy some other weapons
Mhm.
and a line,
Yeah.
and Barry Sanders. It's just
I think there's no doubt, and I think it's illegal to say O.J. Simpson. So even though it may be quite logical, but I think you got to compare, eras here as well, right?
Okay.
And what players could succeed in the modern era,
yeah.
right? So when we do the game, are we weighing championships to the
Well,
impact,
I mean,
or-
I think that just speaks to their greatness. Like Tom Brady,
yeah.
obviously he's unbelievable, and
Mm-hmm.
Joe Montana. Now, obviously Barry Sanders doesn't have any, but he also I didn't think had the pieces around him to be able to win a championship. But he had the skill.
He didn't. So that's true. I think similarly, and
I think I know where you're going.
I got to go with Jim Brown.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to go with Walter Payton.
So Peyton, right there too. But I think in this day and age, Jim Brown would be.
You think he'd still be a stud?
Absolute superstar.
Really?
Yeah. Well, I mean, so Jim Brown with training today, what would he have become? I would liken him to a Derrick Henry type running back, right? Where they're going to get beat up, right? They're going to get beat up, but when they were 21 to 26 years old, and
Just the raw-
Derrick Henry again, no championships, but I just see Jim Brown as being that would have been the
Just
absolute
dominating.
ultimate to see him play today.
Yeah.
Right.
Because he was big. He was powerful.
I've seen none of your classic quarterbacks. I don't think. I mean, I think the end of the line would be Montana, right?
Yeah.
You say they could succeed in today's game. Would Johnny Unitas be Johnny Unitas, today? I mean, his career might be 3 years, and
Yeah.
they're on to the next flavor. But yeah, Montana on. I would go with that. But Jim Brown, I'm convinced.
It's a good choice.
I'm convinced he would be an absolute monster today.
Okay, receiver.
Yeah, receiver.
I've got two. So if you take my first one, I've got my second one already lined up.
Again, I got to look. I'm looking at eras too.
Yeah.
There are some wonderful.
So you're
choices.
taking that player in their prime
Yeah.
and putting them on a field
Uh-huh.
agnostic of time. So if
Yeah.
you could take Tom Brady from whenever you think his prime was, say 4 or 5 years ago,
Right.
and put him on a field with Jim Brown,
Uh-huh.
and I take Montana in his prime with Barry Sanders in his prime, it could be today we put them on
Yeah,
the field,
right.
but we're teleporting them from their prime.
Look, there have been a lot of amazing wide receivers, right? I mean, I think one of the greatest ever was Steve Largent. Now,
Oh, wow.
I don't
Is that
know
where you're going?
no, I wouldn't do that, but I just think, I mean, what a
Yeah.
fabulous football player back in the day. But
You're gonna go with
I've
him.
always thought Randy Moss was
Okay.
the absolute ultimate, right?
So that was my number 2.
Yeah,
I got Jerry Rice as number 1, and
that's fair.
I'm going to have a little bit of chemistry because I got Jerry and,
and
Joe.
Montana. Uh-huh.
So,
Yeah, they did something right.
all right. So I got tight end.
Mm-hmm.
So, man, I've got a couple. I'm going to go with Gronk just because to me, there's a lot of other really, really good tight ends over the years, but I feel like Gronk could do a lot, right? He caught a lot of touchdowns, but he could block,
Mm-hmm.
right? And he was intimidating, and he brought that swagger too.
Mm-hmm.
And like when we did our NBA teams, I was like, you got to have Larry because Larry's bringing swagger and trash talk. And I just feel like Gronk brings a little bit of that, and it's going to be fun with Gronk.
Yeah, I'm between two. You know, I really do think Travis Kelce is as good as there's ever been, right? I mean, the guys, he and Mahomes are already surefire Hall of Famers already, right? And I don't know what the relationship's going to do, right, with Kelsey's life, right?
Oh, you mean
how
Taylor
good is he
Swift?
going to be next week? Yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
yeah. I think that's
Oh
a
my
short-lived
gosh,
thing, but
yeah. Maybe it's even media generated. I don't know. But,
yeah. Are they still together? Jay, can you fact check that?
But
Is that your guy?
No, it's not, because and this is a heart pick, right? The years that Peyton Manning was with Dallas Clark Dallas Clark was unbelievable.
Yeah.
He got championships, but he did it all, right?
Yeah.
And anymore, how can it, like any kind of tight end thing, and me being a Big Ten guy, right? He just look at Iowa tight ends, right? And Dallas Clark was kind of the start of that trend, but he was just spectacular and productive, right? Kelsey, I just can't do the Kansas City thing. But boy,
I thought
he's
you were
pretty
going to go
good,
with Tony Gonzalez.
again, fabulous as well, right? But better than Clark. I don't know. And Clark was pretty high level for a lot of years,
He was.
so I dig him. Yeah, I think he's my guy.
All right. So I'm going to give you first defensive pick. Let's do a linebacker and then more of like a secondary player.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can do a linebacker or defensive line.
Yeah, I mean, for me, and again, growing up in the era, and of course you're a Steelers fan, right? I mean, the only linebacker that you could pick just out of appreciation for your youth is Jack Lambert, right? He was the epitome, right? From the teeth to the just the dynasty that they had on defense, and it worked around him, right? I mean, Mean Joe Green doesn't have the same career without Jack Lambert.
Yeah.
Jack Lambert was the ultimate linebacker to me, right?
Hard nosed.
Yeah. And then, look, as an Ohio State fan, there's a lot of good options at the NFL level too, but Jack Lambert.
You going Jack? That's a good one. Man, it's hard for me to not go Steelers here, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just gonna do it, right? So I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go with T.J. Watt, right? As I'm bringing him off the end, and I know it's a current guy, but I think he will go down in history as one of the best. I love his energy. When he first started playing, I was like, well, he'll never be as good as his brother, JJ. But he's already eclipsed that, in my opinion, and he has no signs of stopping either. He brings it every week. I love his tenacity, his intensity, his work ethic. So I'm going TJ.
Oh, I think that's a good one. So yeah, you almost have to do a defensive end, right?
Yeah. So I'm gonna have to go with Neon Dion, baby. I loved his coverage. I loved his swagger, and I mean, the fact that he played 2 sports too. I mean, he's pretty much a legend with that. But I'm going to go with Dion in terms of my kind of secondary player.
Do you like him as a coach?
I don't dislike him as a coach.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not big into the like I'm wearing sunglasses and this and that. But you know one thing, Dion does it his way, and he doesn't care what others think. So I appreciate that.
Okay. All right, for me, my next. My gosh, I mean, defensively, I mean, there's my goodness gracious.
I wanted to go with Troy Polamalu.
Yeah, yeah,
Just another Steelers
pick.
legend, but
I gotta at least get an Ohio State guy, and since I picked a Michigan guy, and right now I think there's no doubt Nick Bosa, right, or his brother, right? I mean, they're both just studs.
yeah.
And but he's a reigning defensive player.
Nick is with San Francisco, and Joey's with
Joey's with
Chargers?
LA Chargers.
Okay.
Yeah. And
did they both go to Ohio State?
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Where are they from?
Florida.
Okay.
Like down South Florida, someplace. Yeah.
Got it.
Yep. So they're
Did they overlap at all at Ohio State?
I think 1 year.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think they overlapped on their monster contracts too in the NFL.
Well, let's add one more. Let's do a coach. All-time NFL coach.
Yeah, I mean, Vince Lombardi. Yeah, you know how to get the job done.
Yeah. Boy, if Bill Belichick wasn't out, without his shirt on and wherever the heck he was recently on that Ring doorbell video.
I saw that. That was a rough one.
Not sure if he was picking up DoorDash or what that was, but maybe Jay, you can put that video in there a little bit. Yeah, I mean, how can you argue with 6 Super Bowls?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Gosh, I guess I'm not a fan of his personality. He's so dry. It's kind of interesting to watch, but it's hard to argue with his record. So I'm going to go with.
There was a documentary someplace. It might have been Netflix. I'm not sure what it was on, but it was a kind of the story of the relationship between he and Saban.
Okay.
You got to watch that. Yeah, it's really good. I mean, I would say Belichick is more of a mentor to Saban.
Yeah.
Right? And just kind of where Saban got his start in the NFL after kicking around in college. But,
yeah,
they were together, I think, in New York and then maybe Cleveland.
I was going to say Cleveland,
actually, it was
Cleveland. Think, right?
Yeah, because Saban was at Toledo, I think, is where
he
started. And he went to the Browns and worked for him. But just how these two unique individuals, right? I think, personally and socially, kind of came together and to this day, I think they're pretty tight.
I just thought that Belichick was able to get so much out of his players that maybe didn't have the most talent. And you look at some of the Super Bowl championship teams, and I'm talking some of the wide receivers that we wouldn't put in our top 50, right? Mm-hmm. But they were classic wide receivers for the Patriots, whether it's the Wes Welkers, the Danny Amendolas, the Julian Edelmans, just those hard-nosed. They're all white that I mentioned, but race aside, like I just feel like he was able to get people to really maximize their potential.
No doubt about it. I mean, that's like it doesn't matter what you do for a living, the lessons to be learned there, right?
Yeah.
And he was a master at it. Now, what happens when you get later in your career? I think a lot of that formula depended on the players that were there in the core that they had together for such a long time, right? But that's where all that comes together. You get a few people retiring, move on. You don't quite replace them with legends, and maybe that formula doesn't work as well on some of the
worked for about 20 years for them though.
Yeah, well, but boy, yeah, they're bad now.
They are. I think they said they haven't won a playoff game in 4 years, something like that.
Yeah.
So
it's brutal.
So Matt, kind of in conclusion, I always ask my guests, where do you see yourself in 5 years, 10 years from now?
Well, I think one of the things that we didn't get into, I mean, you mentioned I have 10 grandchildren. And, it's fascinating, the life experiences I've had. And yeah, I'm fairly young for a grandparent, but it's what happens when you go to a second marriage and you start with a family that you didn't really know about, right? And it goes from one day to the next, and your role in life and your calling in life changes. But it started off with 5 of us trying to navigate this second lease on life that we were given, growing into a family. And I've been so unbelievably blessed with our 3 boys. We have 10 grandchildren. Now, 5 are biologic and 5 have been adopted. And so, anything that I'm doing in the years ahead is going to be with my family, first and foremost. One of my sons has 7 children, right? Aged 4 to 18. Some of them have had rougher lives than any of us would ever want to acknowledge, right? And so we have unique circumstances all around. But when you decide to take on 7 children, 2 parents don't have the kind of bandwidth to speak into the children individually, right? It's just tough. It's a hard job. So whatever I'm doing, I'll be attached to some kids in some way, shape, or form, just helping, maybe leading, who knows? But it's getting that time back, maybe time that we lose over the years. I imagine I'll still be working in some way, shape, or form in 10 years. I mean, I truly do. But it'll be on my terms, right? And to have that kind of freedom, to go into that phase of life, right? But we talked about what I would do, and what's one of your questions earlier. There's going to be a lot of service to others. I've done enough for me in life, right? And I can't think of a more noble calling, right? So whatever it is, it'll be giving freely, and hopefully inspiring, my family into the next phases of their life.
Love it, my friend. So first and foremost, thank you for joining me, and thanks for making the trip up here. It's always fun to get together with you and reminisce, but also kind of talk about where we're at now and where we're going to head. So
thanks, buddy.
Always a pleasure. Okay. So everybody, again, thank you so much for tuning in. Subscribe, send your comments, send your suggestions. I had a person, I don't want to spoil it because this is going to be an amazing guest. He just agreed to be a part of this podcast, but he's another local legend. I will give you a little hint. He's another historic coach in the tri-state area. Not going to give you the sport or the name, but he will be coming up here in a couple weeks. It's going to be exciting. But, again, give us who you would love to see on the show. And feedback is always, welcomed, and we encourage it. So thanks for tuning in. Make sure to stick around because we're going to do a little, sneak peek into who our guest is next week. So have a great night. Talk to you soon.
Well, I have loved some fishing in the outdoors where I'm free. It's where I spent my time before I hurt my hip and my knee. When that doctor asked me, son, how'd you get in this condition? I says, hey, Tell me all about it, Doc.